Good morning. Are you there?
Yeah, I was waiting for you to bring me in. I've been waiting for a long time.
You've been waiting for a long time. You big liar. You just got on 4 seconds ago.
Who said? Maybe I wasn't. Maybe I was actually in here in another universe.
You're just a big fat liar.
I know you haven't had enough stress this week, so I needed to add just one last little cherry on top with the end of the week.
Oh my goodness. Yes, you yes. As a matter of fact, this morning, last night, let's see. So we lost our washer. It just busted like last Thursday. So, I mean, the thing was just horrible. It was a Whirlpool. I'm suggesting don't buy a Whirlpool. I thought they were good. We had them 5 years. We spent more to repair them than they were ever worth in the first place. So the washing machine finally goes out on Thursday. I think it was Thursday. No, it was worse than that. I think it went out last Tuesday. The guy couldn't come out and repair it until like Wednesday or Thursday, and he comes out and he's like, "Oh, well, it's not repairable. He can't do anything with it." And I'm like, "That's great." So we went into that whole situation with we have this like 3-foot pile high of sooty, smoky, just horrible clothes in there. And so yesterday I went shopping for a washing machine.
Lisa's got your answer right over here. Lisa's got your answer.
Well, hold on. I got to get my comments up. That's what I got. Yeah, I got the Speed Queen for the win because I'm sick of it. I'm just sick of getting washers and dryers that just go, belly up right after you buy them. So I did, but the best price was in Oklahoma City. So I had to go in. So yesterday morning, we have a lamb, bless her heart. She got a staph infection and she's just been fighting it. And I had to take her back to the vet yesterday. So she was at the vet. And I'm out trying to chase down this washing machine. And I get this phone call from the vet. And she's like, okay, well, I gave her a little bit more of this and, gave her a steroid. And I think we're on the way out. I think, she's going to be okay. And so you can come by and pick her up. So I totally forgot about her.
Oh, no. Oh, God.
Totally forgot. And I misplaced my phone because my brain is just not in my brain case. And when I finally found my phone, there was a message on it from the vet like, we still have the lamb. It's like, oh no. So yeah, Dave and I were right there when they opened this morning. Sorry, I'm so sorry. I forgot about her.
We'll give you a pass this week.
I hope so. John says, I want to wash her without all the technology garbage. For my flip phone, could care less to get messages from the washing machine. Okay, so you say that because I'm right with you. but you say that, but we've had this repair guy for years and years. And he said that some of those newer washing machines, if you hook them up to the cloud, because you can actually hook them up to the cloud, he said that he firmly believes, because he's seen it several times, that the cloud is sending messages back to the board that fries the board.
Yeah, I'd believe it. I wouldn't doubt it.
Why would you want that? Lori says, yes, Speed Queen. They're the ones that use them in the laundromats. Yes. So that's what I got. I got a Speed Queen, and I paid, I think it was $50 more a piece to get black ones. So I have black ones, because I don't think you all understand what it's like to live on a farm. And if you have white appliances, yeah, no. So we got the black ones, and I'm very excited about it. But now we have to get them off the back of the truck and into the house. So we do have, we're getting there little by little, we're getting there. So I'm really glad we have our guest on this morning, because I have not been able to pay attention to anything that's happening at 23rd and Lincoln.
Yeah. And no one better than Jason.
And we're great. I mean, we're so happy to have him, but then, Sandra Treywick's out there doing that, and Liza Greavy, and Don, Spencer is out. I mean, so we've got people out there doing it, and I'm very grateful for them, but I'm very grateful for Jason, and he's going to come on here, and I'm going to bring him on, and we'll talk about what's going on at 23rd and Lincoln. Good morning, Mr. Murphy. How are you this morning?
Hello, friends. I'm doing very well. Thank you.
He sent me a text message the other day, and I said, "Are we still on?" And he goes, "Yeah, so long as you don't leave the interview to go fight a fire."
That's a promise, too.
I'm like, well, I'm in the tower. We call this the watchtower now, the fire tower, up here in my second
fire tower.
I'm in the fire tower, so I don't know. The wind's down, the humidity is good, so we're just going to do the, thumbs up and go on. Okay, so you and I were talking briefly a second ago about something that you were like, so you were hoping to have all of the bills done by now, but you said you don't. Why? How come?
So when we talked, several weeks back, you asked me, hey, can you come on here at a future date? And the idea was, sure, I'll come on after the third reading deadline, which is when House bills sponsored in House committees must receive a hearing or a vote, if they're going to, on the House floor. And then this is normally the week about where we're at right now, where that process resets. The Senate takes up those House bills, and the House considers the Senate bills. And so when we set this as the date to talk, my thought is, yeah, we'll be able to tell you what's happened, basically. And so what I didn't realize was, because of that new committee structure that we talked about last time, they had passed a resolution really creating a unique situation by which the third reading deadline was extended 2 weeks. And that has a lot of implications, because it essentially pushes the end of session against a wall. And House rules have been changed in a way that it appears that there will be less transparency at that time, so that what are known as conference committee reports could be filed late at night and possibly heard first thing the next day. And so anything that pushes the process against the wall of constitutionally mandated sine die, or the end of session, is very bad for the people of Oklahoma and transparency generally. And I had missed that point when we scheduled for today. My thinking was, well, it will be third reading deadline, so I can give you an overview of how did that committee system work out, what are some of the notable bills, with a special focus on the ones you probably haven't heard about anywhere else. And then, of course, later on, I realized, well, they've extended that. And so the gist of it is, as of right now, the House has passed probably about 60% of the bills they're going to pass, meaning the remaining 40% all next week, in 1 week. And that's what we're looking at.
So what is the Senate doing while they're doing that?
I'm not real sure. I think that's a really good question. I have a very laser-like focus on the House side. It's the People's House. It's where I was. And normally that draws my focus. That is something that is a great question. I don't have the answer to how the Senate is adjusting to the House's unprecedented extension for 2 weeks for this deadline.
Well, we have an unprecedented Speaker of the House, the youngest one in Oklahoma history. So everything is just unprecedented this year. It's so exciting. I'm so mean, but honestly, I'm so sick of this. So I'm assuming that what you're here to tell Michael and I and everybody else this morning is that the two committee structure that they voted on is not working for transparency as well as they had assured us it was going to.
I think that's safe to say. What we are able to do, because those committees are now, the committee deadlines are here, of course, we're able to get a sense for how much of a difference did those committees make. And so what we were told was that the reason for creating a two-tier committee structure was so that the House would be more deliberative. There would be two committees reviewing a bill instead of one. My pushback to that was that, well, deliberation doesn't happen in committee. The deliberation happens behind closed doors. And so when the chairman decides whether or not he's going to hear a bill, most of the time that's the extent of the deliberation. Those bills, once in a while, will actually have, some committee discourse. But the gist of it is, now what happened was there was a whole second layer of people who are mostly close to leadership who could take their part of the blame. They could take the bullets for the speaker for not hearing a bill that otherwise the speaker would have said, we're not hearing that bill on the House floor. And so I felt that probably, aside from the logistical issues, which there are various ways to address, but I don't think they've done them well, this probably would have the net effect of catching grassroots legislation that didn't have the power of an institutional player, such as a government bureaucracy or a special interest money empire driving that bill, that where the grassroots concepts came in, that they could get past that first committee, but not necessarily the second. And we've seen evidence of that for sure. But what I can tell you, just from a quick review, this is quick, not necessarily double checked and validated, but it looked like the lower committees reported out about 558 bills. And out of those, it looks like about 69 were either not heard or were defeated in secondary committees. But of an important note, 32 of those were in the Appropriations Committee infrastructure, which has always been the case. There has always been an Appropriations Committee and a subcommittee. So that means the net effect of that dual committee system were that there were probably about 37 pieces of legislation which were approved in committee, and for whatever reason, most of them probably were not given a hearing by the chairman of the oversight committee, the second committee, or were defeated in committee. And so when you really think about that from a logistical perspective, the House has set the legislative schedule back 2 whole weeks for what is probably 1 day's work on the House floor. And so, yes, there are 37 less bills that will not be going to the House floor that otherwise might have. Or at least the majority floor leader would have decided whether or not they went to the floor, right?
Do you have a sense of those 32 bills? I mean, are they kind of grassroots bills?
It's an eclectic mix. There are some that probably were abandoned by the author.
Okay.
They may want to pursue those next year. There were some that were bad. Part of the problem for my synopsis is that so many bills are bad that the ratio of grassroots to bad bills, is never in our favor. But there definitely were grassroots bills that were held up. And I can give you an example of one of those, for instance.
Please.
House Bill 1043 by Jenkins of the House is called the Respect for Citizens Act of 2025. And what that was a mirror bill to a bill passed by Ron DeSantis in Florida that said, we don't do illegal alien driver's licenses in this place, but there's a problem, and that is other states do. And so we want to make it clear in Oklahoma law that if another state is going to award illegal alien driver's licenses, then that license isn't going to be respected by Oklahoma. And so it was basically, it might have been a word for word copy of the Florida law. It's a law that's proven to be enacted and has some history behind it. And there was a lot of controversy around that bill, as you might imagine. The Democrats did not like it. It passed out of a subcommittee. One of the Democrat representatives, though, notably in an interview, said, what, Oklahoma undocumented depend on these to commute, to get to work. And I don't know if that was hyperbole, if he just pulled that out of the air, but it indicated this made a very big problem in Oklahoma where this is an abuse. And
oh my goodness.
That bill passed the subcommittee, I believe unanimously. And then it went to go to the Oversight Committee, which was Judiciary and Public Safety, chaired by Robert Menger. And he refused to hear it. And so think about this concept. You had a bill pass, I think, unanimously in subcommittee. This is a very important issue. A Democrat is basically admitting to the level of abuse as he tries to advocate for it or against it. And Robert Menger, we're not even going to let the committee talk about it. It's gone. That's pretty much as best I've been able to tell what happened. It would be interesting to see how Menger publicly defends that action. But what in this case may have happened would be that Menger was told, don't advance that bill. We don't want in the floor leader's office or in the speaker's office to get credit for not giving this bill a hearing on the House floor. We don't know that he was told that, but it might be safe to assume that, or it might be a logical thing to assume that Robert Menger, who barely survived his election last year to what I call a filing day candidate, someone who basically decided to run on filing day against a long-term incumbent who had all the institutional advantages of being a long-term incumbent, and who any number of other reps poured money into that race trying to bail him out and save him, and they barely did it. Why, unless he's just exiting the building and doing what he probably should do and leaving, why in the world does he want to take this particular bullet? That's a good question. Did leadership ask him to do it? We don't know. But this really demonstrates what that two-tier committee structure does.
I agree. I think that's a good example.
Unanimous. The big committee, nope, no vote, no discussion. It's not moving.
Yeah. John said something that's funny. I love John's comments. Nothing like telling on yourself when you get caught, your hand caught in the cookie jar. But I mean, I'm frustrated because, and I think a lot of people are frustrated because here's the other thing. I mean, we had Jay Siegel on the show. What was it, Michael, a week or so into the session? I've literally talked to representatives who have no idea when these second committee meetings are. So if the reps don't know when they are, how do the citizens know when they are?
Yeah.
I mean, have you figured it out?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there were some logistical issues with that, especially with how unique the implementation was. They were not probably good issues in terms of transparency. I didn't look closely enough to say if I had been in the House, would I have always known when and where? But I think there maybe were even issues where those dockets got so big that if the House is in session, you can't have a committee in session at the same time. So there were probably instances where they started hearing the bills, had to go to the House and had to come back, which is horrible for public transparency purposes, because someone who's wanting to follow a bill, let's say that committee was meeting from 10 to 12, session starts at 1:30. and the committee can't do it with lunch, someone who was there at 10 in the morning might not have known to be there for that bill until that 4 or 5 even. So I think there may have been some of that. Logistically, I doubt, it's just hard to make that work.
Well, I couldn't even figure out. So I'm on all of the lists, right, where you get press releases and bill notices and, all that kind of stuff. I was never getting anything from those committees. I mean, nothing that I signed up for was giving me notices about when those committees were meeting. And if I could talk to a representative and they had no idea when the committee was meeting, there's something that has to stop. I mean, you can't, that isn't okay. I don't know how do we make that stop?
I think the question for leadership, if they are looking at the same numbers I am, it's going to have to be, was it worth it for us to save 1 day of work on the House floor and put the whole schedule behind 2 weeks? Now, what is their cost benefit analysis for that? Was it worth it that Menger took the bullet instead of the floor leader, Josh West, or the speaker? Was it worth it to them to have Menger take that bullet, who, by the way, is one of the most vulnerable members in the House right now in terms of getting reelected? And so I would think even at some point, even leadership is going to say, those oversight committee chairs didn't take enough bullets for us to make it worth our while, for all the logistical issues that came with it, and for just the chaos it's going to cause late in session. Now, if I'm to suggest there's a more 4D chess ill intent here, which I'm not sure there is, but it would work with the fact that they haven't, that they may have watered down the rules so that the conference committee report process can be greatly abused. Maybe part of the cost benefit analysis will be, but late in session, we are going to put all of those legislators against the time wall, and they're going to have to vote for the budget. We're going to be able to get a lot of stuff through in conference committee reports that we couldn't otherwise get through. And so if that's part of their cost benefit analysis, maybe they keep this system in place for that purpose. I would certainly hope that's not their line of thinking, but I wouldn't rule that out either.
Well, John, what are you giggling about what John said? Ask how many times do they move the times and dates around on those meetings when they try and slide them in with few to little people knowing. And I do think I'm sorry, I'm way cynical, and I think it's done on purpose. But here's the thing that I just simply, you know what? I think this is part of the reason why I believe it's done on purpose. So, Jason, you weren't in the House when they tried this before, right?
I was there in 2007 when the leadership, it wasn't this logistically challenging of a model because they combined the appropriations and the policy. So there were less committee issues, but they did try it, and I was there.
So did you speak out against it and say, because I know it stopped after one session because Tom Gans said that during the rules debate in the House on that first day. He's like, well, it didn't work the first time we tried it or the second time we tried it. Why are we doing it again?
I think at that time I had no clue what was happening. That was my first year.
Oh, okay.
And so walking in on that new structure, it's so hard on freshmen to have that institutional knowledge that would say this is going to be a disaster or this is bad. Yeah. And again, that system itself wasn't as bad because the subcommittees also had appropriations oversight. So it blended that appropriations and policy together. And the intent of that speaker, which was Cargill, I actually think was good because his view was they were trying to fix all the ills of the Democrat legislature. And he was trying to allow members to specialize. So his idea is if Jason Murphy is the vice chairman of Homeland Security, which I was, then maybe I'm going to have insight into both DPS policy and DPS appropriations. And so instead of being on two different committees in two different structures, they were all blended into one. And his thinking was you're going to be able to specialize. Well, there were logistical issues with all of that. It was abandoned. It didn't work. But I think it wasn't necessarily an issue where you could guess, is he playing 4D chess to get around transparency? It was more an issue of the new Republican leaders were tinkering with how to fix what was widely known to be massive transparency issues with the Democrats. And so I think the intent of that was good, but it didn't work.
Well, I the only thing I can think about at this point in time is I just grassroots complaining to their, representatives and saying, over the break and saying, you've got to go back. This was not transparent. We couldn't find the information. I mean, I don't know how else you do it. I mean, any thoughts are good. I'm happy to listen to any thoughts. I don't know, but let's talk about, maybe we should talk about bills first, and then we'll go back and do that. What kind of bills have you seen come out that we really need to watch out for now moving forward?
So let me give you a fun one as just an example.
That probably that frightens me.
Set to go through the system pretty quickly. It hasn't been heard on the floor yet. It's out of committee. But it's House Bill 2289. It's the Thin-Skinned Congressman Act of whatever year this is, 2025. Basically, what we've seen in the past few years have been what our anti-doxing legislation going through. And we saw a huge abuse of that here recently in Cleveland County, where probably in the George Floyd protest era, an anti-law enforcement doxing bill was passed, which basically says you can't share the address of law enforcement. Well, in the social media era with independent media, that's just going to happen. And it did. And if it wasn't for a thin-skinned sheriff in Cleveland County who apparently had his doxer arrested, if you believe the news reports, you can absolutely see the abuse that is going to occur with this type of legislation. Albeit if there's anyone you wanted that type of legislation for, it would probably be certain types of law enforcement. But the gist is, in this day when people need accountability at all levels of government, doxing laws, probably one, are unconstitutional, and two, it's Pandora's box. And that's been opened in Cleveland County, where someone, I think, posted public documents on his Facebook. Apparently the sheriff's address was in there or something to that effect, or one of his people's. And they arrested the guy. And that is absolutely shocking at every level. And so, undeterred by that, once you have these types of laws in place, everyone's going to want to pile on. And so I think it was 2023, for instance, the Oklahoma Medical Association, I think, decided, well, doctors, front line, right? We've got to protect them. And so they had a couple of the members, I think, carry that legislation, and one of those got through. Yeah. And so when I observed that, I'm like, man, this is pretty broad language. I'm afraid to leave a bad Yelp review of a doctor now, because it almost looks like that might run afoul of the law and I could, get prosecuted. And before you say that's crazy talk, who would have thought the Cleveland County Sheriff would be arresting some Facebook guy for posting what were probably publicly available documents?
Yeah.
And so this year they're taking it a step farther. It's a Kyle Hilbert bill, 2289. And what it has is a whole list of things that can't be disseminated as it relates to James Lankford, congressman. I think the word is Congress people are asking for this. So things that you won't be able to list, like it looks like the direct extension of a congressman's extension. So if I can figure out how to help you navigate the phone tree in James Lankford's office and maybe get directly to James Lankford, where he might have to hear what you think firsthand without filtering it through an army of government paid staffers.
Taxpayer paid staffers.
Yes, that is prevented by this bill. And home address, notably potentially pictures that include his car, which might pick up his license plate, prohibited. So you can imagine, let's say that James O'Keefe wants to talk to James Lankford about, hey, shouldn't you apologize to the people of Oklahoma for working with Joe Biden to legalize the illegal invasion of our country? After all, you did apologize to some other group because you considered having some accountability on the stolen election of 2020. Now, that's a great thing that someone needs to ask James Lankford about. Don't you owe me an apology now that President Trump has proved that when you were working with Joe Biden, you were being absolutely schooled. You were being a total tool. And so why shouldn't Lankford?
Oh, but he's turned over a new leaf now, Jason. Come on, he's all on.
I want my apology. And
Jenny, don't be doxing live on the air, Jenny.
So now I'm going to potentially, as an independent media person, if next time he drops into my Logan County convention, maybe I follow him back to the car and have the camera out, right? And maybe I'm doing live feed from the Logan County convention, and maybe it catches his license plate number. Yeah. Well, these guys in the legislature just made that real problematic because according to this law, a judge can order me to take that video down now. And if I don't, there's going to be any number of legal ramifications for me.
So now, is there a mirror bill on the Senate for that one?
I'm not aware of a companion bill. I just know that 2289 passed out a committee, and potentially this next week it will go to the Senate.
Okay. Well, we need to stop that. All right. Oh, and let's not forget about that, should we? I mean, it's interesting to me that Kevin Wallace basically took a picture of Jim Shaw's home and then a Google map photo with his address on it and posted it on Facebook. I wonder if this is going to go, because isn't it funny how this kind of legislation never gets certain people? It will get certain people, but then other people suddenly, somehow, aren't immune to that law. So, such a frustration. By the way, Marvin wants to give you a shout out.
Excellent.
All right. So what's another one? Hit us up with another one, because yeah, that one's got to stop.
Well, just to add on to that comment about Jim Shaw, the another anti-doxing type legislation, I think it was proposed by Nicole Miller, makes it so that when a candidate files for office, they block, the election board is literally blocking out the address now. So that is a legislator's address they're trying to conceal from the public, essentially. And that has all kinds of implications. It can still be discovered if that candidacy is challenged, like you don't live here, right? But who's going to challenge it blind? And that one, again, it's a thin skin, government officials saying, I have special privilege that the average person obviously doesn't. But these doxing rules, one, I think are unconstitutional, and two, it's going to be an attack and a tool against the independent media. And if we're to properly get the word out, it's independent media that'll do it. And then speaking of Shaw generally, you probably know this, but his bills were not given any committee consideration, as best I can tell. They were all bottled up. And so one of the future Substacks I intend to publish at oklahomastatecapital.com are the list of the chairmen that took the bullet on each one of those. And so, of course, Shaw's key legislation were the moratorium on the green energy invasion, and then better setbacks to protect property rights from the contamination of the green energy invasion. And that was legislation that was held up by Nick Archer, just so arrogant not to allow that discussion in committee. Shaw also had legislation to offset the federal subsidy by basically requiring it be remitted to the state, which would, of course, put us back in the free market as it relates to this technology, which would be huge. Ty Burns, House District 35, held that up. Shaw had a House Bill 1453, which really tried to put some teeth into, I think, the practice by which foreign subjects are buying up Oklahoma ag land. And they can do that probably bypassing the prohibition on them being able to do that by using LLCs and various shell or front entities. Colin Dewell, House District 31, held that legislation up. House Bill 1726, that was Shaw's work to stop, to actually start to study and figure out how to end the biosludge nightmare. Something you've got to have a discussion about now. You can't let the status quo keep going. There's something very wrong going on. And Paskowski, House District 61, locked it in committee. No committee got to even discuss that. He had 1781 to start talking about the Turnpike Authority's ability to take your toll dollars and do advertising with them, right? Why are my ever increasing tolls going into advertising? So that they can try to rebrand their awful public reputation so they can get away with increasing my tolls even more. House District 81, Mike Osborne, lame duck, channeled that one up in rules, bottled it up in rules, as he did Shaw 1780, which allowed a Firearm Self-Defense Act in government buildings. And so the Rules Committee chairman is one of the speaker's right-hand people. And when they send something to rules, usually that's a bad sign, or it's a very good sign. It means that they were going to bottle you up with a guy who's a lame duck and does not care. Or two, they're going to fast track it and bypass that awful subcommittee, full committee system they've set up. So it was an escape valve by which they could send bills around that system, or they can just have the lame duck guy who's not up for re-election and say, no, we're not going to put a prohibition on Turnpike advertising, nor is the committee even going to talk about it. Osborne also bottled up probably one of the more low-key but most important bills, I would say, that were filed this year, and that was House Resolution 1003 by Molly Jenkins. And that bill really got at the concept, something that we're really facing with transmission lines, the Cimarron Link project specifically. What it would do is allow people of Oklahoma to vote to say that if you're a private company, maybe private companies shouldn't have the right of eminent domain. And that's something that needs discussion, and it needed it this year because that project is ongoing. And anytime you have federally subsidized green energy transmission lines and the private companies putting those in and taking your property to put it in, that's a discussion that we at least should have had in committee. But of course, Osborne, nope, we're not doing it. And so all of this to say, one of the most important votes of this year was were on amendments that were offered to the House rules, by which Tom Gann introduced components of his Gann plan that would have put into House rules the right of a legislator to introduce and get a hearing on at least two bills that he proposed. So Shaw, in this case, could say, you know what? No committee chairman should be able to just bottle up every single bill that I'm sponsoring because leadership doesn't want me to have a voice, because I showed that no matter how powerful a member of the legislature is, including the appropriations chairman, Kevin Wallace, who Shaw beat, they're vulnerable to the grassroots when they don't represent the values of the people. And so there's clearly, in my view, that call went out, and that's why I wanted to name those names, those chairmen, because what I'm highlighting is no matter how important the idea that Shaw brought to the table, they were deaf to it. They weren't going to hear it. And that's why probably one of the most important votes of the year, if not the most important, was when Tom Gann took to the floor and said, hey, Mr. Speaker, I want to amend your awful rules proposal, make it a little less awful, by saying that in our rules, any member of this House elected by the people of Oklahoma to have a voice, like they elected Jim Shaw, should have the ability to, one, get a hearing on the bill in committee, and two, if that is approved, get a hearing on the House floor. Just let the legislators vote. If Nick Archer's group wants to go on the record saying, no, we don't want to put a moratorium on Joe Biden's green energy invasion, they need to vote their conscience. But then the voters will hold them accountable. And with the smoke and mirror system we have now, the Gann plan would have broken through that a little bit. The only Nick Archer can be held accountable. Everyone else now in this system, the only way to really hold them accountable is to say, how did you vote on that Gann amendment? Which, by the way, even though the presiding officer seemed to indicate was a recorded vote, was not a recorded vote. And the only way we know how people voted on that were grainy screenshots of the voting board from the live feed at the time. And there were just a handful that voted with Tom Gann to do that. But the thing I would also highlight is there are a whole lot of legislators who are kowtowing to the grassroots, pandering to them, I guess I should say. They go to their meetings, they act interested in stopping the green energy invasion and any number of other populist conservative concepts. But when the push comes to shove on that most important vote, they weren't with Tom Gann and the Gann plan. They were with leadership in saying, no, we're going to make it okay for the House to absolutely not give the people's representatives the ability to at least have a recorded vote on these important concepts, at least have a discussion on these concepts. And so until that mushy middle, there's probably about 15 of those critters, until they are really held accountable. It's good to vote conservative on final passage, but it's all smoke and mirrors up until that point because you keep enabling leadership to set the rules of the game. And to have a smoke and mirror system, that means they tightly control which votes occur. And that day has to come when all of those people that show up at the grassroots are asked, what do you think of the Gann plan? And if they either don't know what it is or they're opposed to it, or if they do that politician thing where they talk for a long time and then you're not sure if they're for or against it, then it's time to hold them accountable too, even if that means running against them. Until these legislators are willing to do two things: forgo lobbyist money and special interest money and support the Gann plan, then they're part of the problem. They're making the bad system what it is. And so I would encourage any grassroots person who talks to their legislators, especially in those public forums where that person is just pandering and pandering and pandering, to say, Mr. Legislator, how did you vote on the Gann plan? And would you consider foregoing lobbyist money? And then just listen to the excuses thereafter, and that will tell you everything you need to know.
Well, I mean, we've done so many videos of so many of the legislators just looking at their ethics reports to show that they get maybe like John Pfeiffer, for example, who's up, kind of around Enid Blackwell area. And he had, what was it, Michael? Do you remember? Was it one donation from the grassroots? Otherwise it was all special interest money.
Yeah, it was, he was probably one of the most extreme.
Yeah. He was the worst one. He only had like one donation from his district. Everything else was special interest money. So, there's another issue that we've kind of been dancing around with what you've been talking about that I think needs to be discussed as well. And we've discussed it before, but my feeling is you keep discussing about it and, people start really paying attention. And that is the culture of the Capitol is to remove the individual from the process. So when you really get down to it, what's important? Caucus. It's not your individual people in your district. It's caucus, what caucus wants, what caucus does. It's all, hey, we're a team up here. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're not a team. There's nothing about you that should be a team. Your job is at home in your district with your individual citizens that should be electing you. But see, that's the thing. When you don't really have any citizens electing you, you're only beholden to big business. So you're going to do what they say. But we've got to make sure that people understand that the whole culture of the Capitol isn't about, hey, what do people in your district think? What is your district saying? It's what caucus wants, what the group of the Republicans want. Well, you need to stick with what caucus wants. These are our legislative priorities. Caucus needs to focus on that. No, BS. That's not it.
Well, and could you drill that down a little bit, Jenny, and not even say what the group of Republicans want, more like just what leadership wants? Do you think that's even more accurate?
Well, I think that's what Jason's been saying. Am I wrong, Jason?
You're spot on. Especially freshman members, they get that drilled into them. We're a team, and they are told, if there's something that you're going to want adjudicated, make sure whatever you do before you go out there and do a press release or propose it or whatever, or do an amendment maybe on the House floor, inform the caucus first. And what they're ostracized if they act too independently, if they represent their voter as opposed to playing team ball. But what's important to realize, and what you've put your finger on, is the primary tool of caucus is that if you go to that meeting not understanding that what you're about to see is poorly performed theater, that certain people are going to always say certain things, probably coached ahead of time to try to drive the mood of the caucus in the direction leadership wants, then you're the pawn if you don't realize that. When you go to that caucus meeting and you feel, hey, I'm behind closed doors, this is the real discussion, it is still fake. It's absolutely a control tool used usually by leadership and their goons to try to manipulate emotions, to give the perception of a group decision when in fact it was not a group decision. And those poor fellows that think it is and try to participate in that discussion and don't realize it's actually a poorly written script, a poorly written theater, they're the jokers. And the gist of it is, whether caucus is used in a we versus them, us versus the 20 grassroots members out there on Facebook. Don't worry about them. It's the same 20 people. Let's shut down Jim Shaw and let's move on down the road.
Yeah, they're just political animals. We don't really care about them.
Yes. That's where there's an artificial world built up to manipulate those people into thinking leadership is in control and to do what leadership wants, not to worry about the grassroots. Or other tools are, hey, the Senate, they're killing all of our stuff. So whatever you do, follow our lead in the next few votes, because it's part of our strategy to retaliate against the Senate, who's going to kill your bills too, unless you follow our lead and give us the hand to push back. Let's go over with the Senate today. And then a week later, it's the governor vetoed a bill. We're going to show him we're going to override vetoes on this, or do press releases, or it's just nonstop.
And it's nonsense. It's nonstop nonsense.
But you would be amazed how many that mind conditioning takes place when those members are freshmen, and they buy into that so frequently. And in the last few years, when there haven't been many conservatives in the House, there wasn't a counterbalance. There wasn't someone sitting next to them to say, you know what, this is all fake. Don't worry about it. So they didn't know. And that's why we kind of lost a generation of Republican House members, because they purged the conscientious, wise, conservative members from that.
Not they. Chris Kennedy did. Not they. Representative Chris Kennedy, who is counselor to the youngest Speaker of the House in Oklahoma history, a new special role for Chris Kennedy, who purged all of the conservatives in 2018 and was happy to say he did it himself. And apparently he's got his name on some new stuff that's coming up to try to get some dark money in to get conservatives again. So we've got to be on our toes, grassroots people, because they're just going to come after these guys again. They're not going to let Jim get to any more than 2 years. They're not going to do it.
Yeah.
They can't have it.
Yep.
He's the fly in their ointment.
Yes. He'll be prepared, but yes. So would you like the white pill stuff now?
Uh-oh. What's that?
The good news.
Oh, well, good. Okay. Well, geez, I wasn't sure where we were going with that. I did want to say something quickly, though, because Dorn said it. Perfect example is these city and Western Oklahoma legislators determining what's best for Eastern Oklahoma people. And I think that's I'll try to be brief. So I was a biologist here, and that's how I went to school. And we have what is it, 6 or 7 different ecotones in the state, meaning our state is so different ecologically. Our state is one of the most ecologically different states anywhere.
Yeah.
That's part of the reason why we have to have legislators, who are representing the people there in their area. Not everybody getting together in a caucus and saying, well, we need to do what's right for Oklahoma. Well, I mean, in some cases, but the majority of the time, you're representing people in your individual district because there are individual things in that area that maybe that definitely somebody in Western Oklahoma doesn't have, if you're in Eastern Oklahoma, or if you're in Oklahoma City that Durant doesn't have, or whatever. We have these reasons to be individually represented, and that's not what's going on.
Yeah. So that's a big part of the smoke and mirrors game, right? It's finding the guy who can take a bullet and not suffer electoral consequence. And that's why the GAN plan on saying every bill gets a vote is so important, because a lot of legislators can't take that bullet. And so in this case, it's let's find someone from Western Oklahoma whose district has probably already been destroyed by the green energy invasion, and he doesn't have anything to fear now. And so why not take that bullet? Back in the day when the Democrats had it, whenever there was pro-life legislation, it was inner Oklahoma City Public Health Chairman Bernice Kane, the doctor of death, who would just channel, anything that was assigned to that committee. If it's pro-life, it's dead probably. And all the Democrats are like, no, I'm pro-life. That's some nutty Oklahoma City guy that won't let us vote on it. Isn't that a shame? But the gist of it is the whole system has long been built around, if there's a guy in Western Oklahoma who's against Eastern Oklahoma County interest and doesn't have electoral consequence, then allow that one person to take the bullet, not that it matters to him. And then whatever happens, the legislature itself doesn't have to have a vote on it. And that's what the GAN plan changes. And that's the most important part of the GAN plan is every legislator can designate 2 pieces of legislation. And guess what? Everyone has to go on the record in some form or fashion, has to go on the record saying, am I for it or am I against it? And then allow the people of Oklahoma to decide, is this something we need to hold them accountable for?
A couple things. Andrew said he agrees. The state ought to be split into several states, but at least along I-35 east-west. I mean, possibly. And then Dorn says Trey Caldwell did this with the utility committee, House bill on setbacks, all smoke and mirrors. And it all stems from back to how our republic has been replaced by a democracy.
Yeah.
Notice they say that all the time. Well, we are in a democracy. No, we're not. No, we're not. It's a republic if you can keep it. For the republic is run by the people from the bottom up as a country, and we're not. And I know you can't disagree with that, Jason. I mean, I know you believe that 100%.
Yep, absolutely, for sure.
So, okay, so what are the white pill bills?
Excellent. Surveillance state. This has been the thing that over the last few years has been the scary, scary stuff, right?
Yes.
And this was the year House Bill 1626 by John George of the House was absolutely, it looked like a high-powered lobbyist were set to drive this. This was authorizing the flock scanners. Yeah. You've had Marvin Goodman and Tom Gann on to talk about this. And if I could point to the reason we have this particular white pill, and it's big, is because of those 2 people. Marvin with independent journalism, exposing things that people aren't aware of, and city leaders aren't told when they sign off on this, if they even do. And Tom Gann for just tirelessly putting his name on the line time and time again. He didn't have to do that. He had no reason to go against the grain on this, but they have both been absolute citizen heroes here. And guess what? That author did not move that bill. But what that would have allowed would be the surveillance network known as Flock which is frequently a sole source contract. Not a lot of people talk about how disturbing that is. These are units that are costing cities thousands of dollars a year. And they're creating a whole new network of warrantless surveillance that's being tapped into by hundreds and thousands of departments, including federal agencies such as the ATF, for basically being able to put a biometric ID on every vehicle and then track that vehicle wherever it goes in pretty much real time. It is some of the most Orwellian, scary stuff.
You have to go back and say it again. Warrantless, 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 warrantless.
For sure.
You know, if you don't understand what that means, people, you have to have there has to be a warrant issued by a judge for any surveillance. Any surveillance. I mean, you can't just, I mean, that's the beauty of our Constitution, is that we have protection in our own homes and papers. I mean, we have a Fifth Amendment, for Pete's sakes. And you have to be able to prevent the government from just going in and surveilling anything. That's what's so horrible about these cameras. There's no warrant. It totally supersedes the Constitution of the United States and puts you in a place as a citizen where you can be watched, which again is against the Constitution, at least 3 separate places, right, Jason? The first, the fifth, and what's the other one? I can't remember. What's there are like 3 parts of three of them. But anyway, the point of the matter is, this is so bad. And yes, John George is my representative, and he and I have had numerous arguments over that bill because it's completely wrong. And oh gosh, it makes me so angry. They always use the word safety. Everything they try to screw us over with to get our liberty away from us has something to do with our safety. No. We have to steal your First Amendment right, or you won't be safe. We have to steal this right, or you won't be safe. I get so sick of the safety thing.
Sure.
I don't want to be safe. I ran into a damn fire, for Pete's sakes. Leave me alone. Sorry.
Live on the air, no less.
Well, but you know what I mean? I mean, safety is a thing that should be determined by the individual. I believe that this is safe. I don't believe that this is safe. We don't need a nanny telling us what is and isn't safe. I mean, am I wrong here?
No, but at the same time, Jenny, just overall society, we're being conditioned. I mean, you're just being watched. I mean, your entire life is out there on the internet through Facebook and everything else. I mean, most people don't even care about that stuff.
Well,
I mean, I'm not saying us here, like grassroots, Oklahoma kind of people, but in general, you know, most people, they have no clue. Plus, they're not being taught anything about the Constitution or their actual rights or liberty. I mean, they know nothing about liberty. Most people just want to walk down the street and just follow orders and do whatever they got to do.
No, I couldn't, Diane, but I could scream about it if you would like. I only have enough, you know, I only know what I want, and that is for them to leave us alone. But, you know, it's the saddest thing, to follow up on what you said, Michael. I've taught, I was talking to somebody, I don't even remember, and give me after this week and I'll get caught back up in my head. But I was talking to somebody who was talking about the fact that they said, well, so many people wouldn't even do what you did anymore. You know, they would just go, oh, well, I have to, you know, evacuate and let the government take care of my place. Right. I mean, so most people wouldn't have even stayed to fight. They would just listen to the government and say, you know, yes, I will leave my property. Right. I mean, then, you know, what happens after that? Well, I can't go to work. I'm traumatized by what happened. I have to go. Oh, I'm traumatized. Right. I mean, it's like there's no part of us anymore that understands safety because we can't make ourselves safe and we don't want to. We want somebody else to do that. So if that's the case, and we want to complain and whine about things. So if that's the case, how do you make people understand that safety is their own personal issue, and that people like John George and other, well-meaning, I'm trying to protect your safety, police, whoever it is, come in and say, well, we need you to have this and we need to have you have that for safety? How is it that they even understand that that isn't their job?
So another white pill moment, I would tell you that at least in the closed Republican primary audience, a big reason why that system must be preserved at all cost, to the point of that state question, you will find 80% of the people are very minded towards your mindset on this. We talked about Robert Manger's close scare last time. This was the number one issue in his race, because guess what? He was the author of this last year. Guess who wasn't the author of this year? He learned his lesson a little bit there. Not so much on that other thing, definitely on this one, I think. And so there's a reason George had to pick up this bill this year, potentially. He didn't defer to the chairman of that committee, which is Manger. And I think that you will find that in a Republican primary audience, especially, and even on the Democrat side, on the ACLU, for instance, absolutely opposes this. So the gist of it is there are a lot of forces pressing back on this issue. The problem that we had was that Flock had that tech mentality, I think, of move fast and break things. They got a lot of money off of that. Not obviously before the court system catches up. This is constitutionally infirm because it is an omnipresent network, and the court has been making itself clear on this. You can't have omnipresence. You can have incidental observations in the public arena, but once you get to where you can significantly track where someone goes, whether it's GPS, whether it's cell phone data or whatever, you need a warrant. And so that will catch up to this eventually. However, when you're moving fast and breaking things, a 10-year court process, the one thing they're going to move fast and break, aside from making all that money for themselves, unfortunately, and I hate to see this, is the credibility of law enforcement, who has signed on to this in quite a few departments without first stopping and doing a real deep analysis of, one, this is Orwell, two, it's clearly constitutionally infirm, three, it's not specifically authorized by Oklahoma state law for this purpose, and four, it's not supported in our communities. Once our communities realize the depth and the extent of what this really is. And so that's probably the unfortunate fallout from this, is that courageous people have caught on, they're pushing back. That initiative is dead in the water right now. The only way I think it moves is if it's snuck through in the conference committee process, which is going to look very bad if they choose to do it that way. And then next year is an election year, and I don't think they can move it in an election year. And so all of those factors line up to say it's frustrating when you talk to people that say, hey, it's too late. We're watched everywhere we're at now anyway, so let's just give up the fight, right? The cell phone argument is one of those where they say, hey, my cell phone is following me everywhere, so I have no expectation of privacy anymore. The battle is lost. But the difference here, I would say, is you can turn that cell phone off. You can do that flip phone thing. You can do whatever you want. There's no law mandating this. When it comes to a scanner on every highway, only the lawbreakers will be invisible because they'll use the technology, the plate swapping, the stolen car. If you notice, probably one crime you're seeing a lot more of these days is stolen plates. These are the things that the criminals will do that they'll be able to adjust. But the average person, the person, the liberal ATF, when they want to see, did you talk to a certain person whenever you maybe picked up a gun that you hadn't quite finished the paperwork on or something. These are the things the local police are handing them, this warrantless surveillance right there. And it's scary, scary stuff. And this battle is being won in Oklahoma. Numerous people get the credit, but I think top two are Goodman and Gann, and that's huge. Now, a similar issue, not unlike that, has been in the last few years. There's been a huge push from the transportation bureaucracy for what's called track and tax. And that's the idea that using some form of technology, and man, they've looked at every technology they can, they want to be able to charge you for every mile you drive. And in some venues, like New York, they're now doing variable rate pricing if you want to go into, say, lower Manhattan. Until recently, when the Trump administration came in, a lot of this is tied to the federal government and there's pushback. But this was definitely through the National Conference of State Legislatures a priority issue. Oklahoma, Brian Hill ran a bill that created a pilot program for it. It was the first step. And they were running fast with this in Oklahoma because of that turnpike system. They already have a lot of this technology in place because there are so many awful turnpike miles here. And when you get right down to it, Oklahoma looked like ground center for the effort to put track and tax in place. They authorized the pilot program. They obviously manipulated the pilot program so that they could point to it and say, hey, this is a great example of why we need this. It will work. And this was the year they were going to get it, the non-election year. This was when it was all going to happen. And they got up to the legislative session and the word got out, we're not even trying. So once again, another white pill. And this was lots of candidates and lots of venues. I think the first one I remember doing this was Carmen Greider in House District 31. House District 31 would have been a much better place had she won, and she came close, but she was sabotaged by dark money. She ran on this issue before anyone knew about it, got the word out.
Oklahoma Medical Association, dark money too, by the way.
Yes, yes.
It was OMA. So for all of you people who just think doctors are great, I'm sure there are individual doctors that are great, but the OMA is awful.
And then earlier, I mentioned the two legislators that ran that bill for, making sure my Yelp review of a doctor negative and maybe identifying him too much, maybe was criminal. One of those legislators was the Colin Dole, House District 31, who sponsored one of those bills.
Yep.
Right after it looked like a lot of that dark money came in to get him elected. And the other one that sponsored it, same exact dynamic. An opponent that was demonized by dark money, and then probably a lot of spending to elect Cindy Rowe. And it was her bill that eventually put that doxing prohibition in the law books. And so you can see potentially a return on investment for the dark money in this respect.
But I think it's a good point that you make. That's how the dark money works. And that's what happens with that. I mean, there's a reason for that. There is an agenda. And they need to fulfill that agenda. Okay, is there anything else good?
Oh, yes. House Bill 1751 is not a good bill, but it got the tiniest bit better Tuesday, I think, because a floor amendment was filed, an untimely filed floor amendment, which shows the level of panic here. But that was legislation that took away your ability when you renew your driver's license to stay outside of the Real ID federal mandate. So Real ID is the federal government's initiative to make sure they have extra biometrics on you via the driver's license system. It's a thing for the last 10 years. You've heard news stories by the corporate media saying, by the way, tomorrow the federal government is going to make sure you can't do anything you need to do in your life if you don't go out and get your Real ID. And it just keeps going and going. Our generation of Republicans said, we're not going to comply. Charlie Key had the bill that said Oklahoma is not going to be a Real ID state. And so guess what? We're out. And then later on, the next generation came through and said, well, yeah, we're in. But I tell you what, if you don't want to be in, we'll let you have an exemption from it. So it allowed individuals to opt out. Now, this group is coming through in the form of House Bill 1751 and saying, you know what? As of the end of 2025, nah, you have to be in. So we all knew we would get to this day, right? It took them about 15 years from when we passed Charlie Key's initiative to say, okay, everyone's in. And the federal government just keeps doing their thing where they threaten us every so often. And so that bill came out of committee. Notably, this is where Mike Osborne, the lame duck chairman of the Rules Committee, finally decided there was a bill he could pass. It comes out of Rules, which means it did not go through the subcommittee and the full committee system, policy and oversight. It goes through the bypass valve. Well, I would suspect you'll find just about every bill that comes out of there probably couldn't be defined as grassroots. So he gets it out of Rules. It's headed to the House floor. It'll probably be heard next week. It's a very bad bill still. I think it's the Service Oklahoma request bill, like 130 pages of fun. But in it, I think is an exemption from like the fleet requirements of Oklahoma law, which is that agencies can't build an empire of vehicles on their own. And every agency probably looks at that law and says, I want an exemption. Service Oklahoma gets an exemption if this bill passes. But the gist of it is, with that floor amendment filed on Tuesday, the couple of pages that disappeared out of that mega bill were the Real ID exemption, which would have said that no longer after 2025 can I go down to the tag agent, renew my license, and say, by the way, whatever you do, make sure you mark in big red letters on my license, not Real ID compliant, because I'm not compliant. Fortunately, if that floor amendment is adopted, which it looks like it would be, then that isn't something we have to worry about yet. Again, maybe they sneak it through in the conference committee process. I'm sure they'll try again next year or the year after. But for this year, it looks like the end run around the getting out of Real ID is not going to happen.
Okay, so we really still need to watch that one, HB 1751, just to make sure the Real ID stuff doesn't get, and it shouldn't be passed anyway. You said it was a bad bill.
Well, yeah, I'm voting no on that all day long because of the exemption for Service Oklahoma from the fleet management that lets them do, the empire building with the fleet, which is second only to the empire building agencies do with their real property buildings, which is also something they try to get exemptions from. But yes, it's a bad bill, but it's the request bill for an agency. So this is one of those bills that's driven by the bureaucracy, in this case, Service Oklahoma. So it more likely than not goes through. But if for any reason the title gets struck on it in the Senate, which means it goes to conference, yes, this is the one you want to watch very carefully, because it's a 130-page bill and they just have to add those 2 pages back in. And remember, when they changed the rules this year, they appear to have made it so that the conference committee report on this could be filed late at night, and the first thing the next day it's taken up on the House floor.
Wrong. But, and I do want to make this point, Oklahoma was exempted from Real ID and you don't have to have one, but the federal government still hasn't unexempted you. So I think they're still making it as of September or something. You have to fly with one or something.
I think they were saying that in September 2015. It's a moving target and it just keeps moving and moving and moving. So who knows? And with the Trump administration there, who knows? This is why we refuse to comply, because maybe there's a hostile administration. But
you should refuse to comply anyway, Jason, because it's not, we've got to quit giving the government everything. We got to just quit saying, Mother, may I follow all of your directions, please? I mean, we've got to quit this and just go, I'm not doing your BS stuff.
Yep. And
do not comply.
Maybe there's a day when by force of government, they can force you to do something. But if enough people don't comply, then that's why that window just keeps moving and moving and moving. They just can't, at the end of the day, control an unwilling population. They have to scare us by moving calendar date after moving calendar date so that 98% comply. And then they chase down the 2%. But the gist of it is legislators have to stay strong and courageous. And this legislator, he calls himself Dale Curbs. The Senate author, by the way, is Chuck Hall, Senate District 20, who is the appropriations chair in the Senate. Now, Hall may not have known it was in that bill. I don't know, but Curbs would have. He obviously just took it out. These legislators are betraying us whenever they're doing bills like this.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Okay. Is there, what else are you tracking that's
a white pill?
Well, are there any more, or what about the bad ones?
There has been movement on the food freedom front. A couple of bills, House Bill 1162 by Gann, I think is on general order. And that's the one that makes it clear that farms can sell a certain amount of raw milk locally. That's huge. That really codifies a great Make America Healthy Again type approach into law. And
Yeah, I
there's a
just talked to a neighbor the other day who sells goat milk, and of course she can't sell goat milk except at her farm. So if she wants to sell it and people want to buy it, they have to drive all the way out to between Chandler and Wellston, you know,
Mhm.
where she is, so that she can get it. So yes, this is the kind of stuff that is good. I mean, again, put the onus back on the people. If you don't want to drink it because you're scared of it or whatever, don't. But for those of us who want to, let us have what we want. We'll take the responsibility. We'll handle that.
Yep. And then another white pill in this area, House Bill 1515 by Hildebrand, one of the freshmen and one of those who I believe is refusing the lobbyist money, which is huge. He had a big win. I think this got off of the House floor and is headed to the Senate. House Bill 1515, and it's a food truck promotional.
Oh, we saw that one. Yeah.
Yes. The idea being that, especially I think in the food freedom sense, the food truck industry could really provide a lot of options. And this standardizes it so that they don't have to go through, they can have a standard licensing process or permitting process so that they don't have to navigate the bureaucracies of 30 different city halls or health departments or whatever. And so that's a pretty neat attempt, and that I think a lot of entrepreneurs who really believe in the food freedom, make America healthy again approach are going to probably get into the food truck space, because the startup cost and the ability probably to avoid some of that bureaucracy and regulation is going to be there.
Yeah. So I'm going to go back up here because OKHPR had a comment, and they have a bad bill, which is SB 1078. It's this stupid glyphosate, which is called Roundup. Basically, if you know what Roundup is, don't use Roundup. Do you know that on small areas? Now, I'm not talking about, as a, if you're an agriculturalist, although I don't know why that wouldn't work either. But anyway, vinegar actually kills weeds. If that's what you're just trying to do around your house or in your garden, use vinegar, full strength vinegar. They don't like it and they'll die. But glyphosate or Roundup has been implicated scientifically in numerous studies for causing what they call leaky gut syndrome, which is when your gut doesn't contain all of the bacteria in the gut that's there to break down food, and it gets loose in your peritoneum, which is the, just your body cavity basically, and it causes all kinds of autoimmune disorders, including, oh gosh, people have, gluten allergies and, things like that. It's all been implicated in this kind of stuff, swelling of the joints. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And I can't remember which senator it is trying to exempt these companies from the use of glyphosate.
Glyphosate.
Thank you. Glyphosate. Why do I want to say glyphosate?
Because you're a biologist.
Maybe, who knows? Anyway, thank you, Michael. Glyphosate, and we, we don't want this to be used. There are other things that we can use to fight weeds.
Yeah. And also for all the moms out there with all your kids, you protect your kids to the 9th degree. Just an FYI, all the cereals, all the box cereals, I mean, they literally have the highest concentrations of glyphosate, period. I mean, we have got to, in my opinion, we have to eliminate that from our food supply. I mean, it's just a silent killer. I mean, it's a slow kill, silent killer. And look at all the problems all these kids have. I mean, you've never seen kids so sick, have so many problems across the board. And in my opinion, it all goes back to food, all goes back to all that stuff that's in the food.
Well, and I mean, we have our puppies because an animal, a dog, got into a pond where they'd sprayed Roundup around the end, and it got into her milk and killed all the puppies and killed her. And Eliza said, if I use Roundup anywhere on the 3 acres around my home, my cats start having seizures and asthma.
Wow.
I mean, It's just bad juju. Oh, and then Dorn says the Senate bill that is establishing 3,000 foot setbacks for marijuana stores from schools and churches, the 1/4 mile setback of 750 feet wind turbine from homes is so controversial in regards to property rights when it benefits a certain group.
Yeah.
And Laurie, who does this for a living, says gut toxicity leads to all those issues, and glyphosate is poison.
Well,
so let me go back and mention that bill again. It is SB 1078. So make sure your senators vote no on SB 1078. And whatever the other one is, because don't forget Wendy was saying the Forever Chemical, they have a bill to exempt Oklahoma. And I'm trying to remember what it is. I mean, if we had Sandra on here, she could tell you for absolute fact. But because of the fact that the biosludge that you mentioned earlier, Jason, has so many of those help me, Pete. Again,
PFACs?
My brain still isn't working.
Are they PFACs?
Thank you.
Yeah.
PFAS, PFASs, PFAS, because it has so much PFAS in it, and the PFAS is cancer causing, gets all over into anything. Wendy found it. It's HB 2305. So that's another one we need to say no on, is the big HB 2305 is a no. And yeah, so thank you, Wendy and Laurie. Both got me there. PFAS. Yeah, so we've got to stop that too. So the glyphosate bill and the PFAS exemptions, those have to stop too. Okay, Jason, anything else?
On those proposals, I'm not sure on that House bill that was mentioned. I do know last year there was a House bill, I think passed by the House, maybe not moving in the Senate, but it was aimed at waiving the forever chemical liability of those who dispose of wind turbine blades, because they do not have a way to dispose of those right now. And it's creating what are called wind turbine graveyards. And if you ever see pictures of those, they're awful. But the problem is waiving the liability isn't necessarily going to solve the real problem, which is the contamination when you bury those forever chemicals. Right. And this is the nightmare of the green energy invasion. They haven't worked out the solution of disposal yet, quite obviously, and recycling or whatever. And so that's why that moratorium bill is so important. You can't keep doing this until you know what is actually going to happen. And when the government subsidizes it, it doesn't give the free market the time to tell you this is not viable in the free market because you can't dispose of them. Right. And that is the great risk. And then on the Senate bill, I think this is the version of the House bill that was abandoned by the author on a Saturday, if I remember right. So anytime you see the House of Representatives issuing a press release on a Saturday, that is something that you want to double check, because it means someone really wanted to get the word out. And so I think the companion bill to this, which probably wasn't the companion bill at the time, because this Senate bill has been shucked, which means it was filed as one thing. And then in early March, it became this thing, which is a sign that they probably saw what happened in the House, which was the author who had it panicked and sent out a press release on a Saturday saying, no, that's Dale Curbs again, by the way. I'm not doing this. Forget about it, because the grassroots had engaged. And then it looks like in the Senate, they shucked a bill, and they have signed on the Speaker Pro Tem, Anthony Moore, as the House author, which is not a good sign, because it means at the highest level of leadership, they're bringing this back to the House if they can. And so that is absolutely one you've got to watch for, just because of who that House author is. And then just as a tip, in this bill, page 1, line 17, if anyone's looking at it.
Now, which bill? Tell me again.
Senate Bill 1078. You're going to notice the word notwithstanding. Anytime you see a bill, especially in the new law, you see the term notwithstanding. That's a sign of either nefarious attempt or very lazy lawmaking, because what they're telling you is we're not going to go into those pages and pages of law books and amend anything that conflicts with this. And so what that means is there are going to be two laws. This one that says, notwithstanding anything else the law books say, this is what's going to happen. And when they do that, what happens? Well, the courts get to interpret when was notwithstanding put in there, and how is notwithstanding interfacing with subsequently passed laws. But two, other legislators, they don't necessarily know, what are you afraid of? Why are you saying this law is more important than any other law? And so as we talk to legislators and say, hey, here's the training you need to understand bad bills, one of the foremost warning signs is the word notwithstanding. When you see that, and it's in the new law section of the bill, it means watch out. There's something else in the law that they're either too lazy to go update, which is bad altogether because that just confuses people, or they don't want you to know what else is in the law.
So Dorn has a couple of them that Rader has the SB 281 and 271. And if I remember correctly, Dorn, you'll have to help me out. I think that's the one on carbon capture where he's trying to do something with that. You'll have to let me know. John Boy says HB 1775 is the one that you were talking about, but he put it back in play now, and it's on something else. So it's still a bad bill, and it's still out there. Still needs to be stopped. Oh no, sorry. Dorn's telling me now it was either one, 281 or 271. Or I'll have to look it up to make sure. Okay, and then I loved it where Gracie said the real solution is we just stop the windmills altogether, which makes me. Laurie asked, can we have a list? Yes, I'm going to put, I'm writing all of these down. I'm taking my set of notes. I'm going to write them all down and hopefully get them up by the end of the day. We're hoping. The wind is coming up, but I'm hoping. Which one died in conference, Wendy? I'm not really sure. They're doing the exact same thing with the language in SQ 836 on open primaries. That word notwithstanding is completely ridiculous. So if you looked at SQ 836. Oh, it's the state question language for open primaries.
Yep, that's one of the most dangerous words you can see in any proposed initiative. When you see notwithstanding, it means you probably got a big problem here.
Okay, and so which one was HB 2305? Which one was it? Oh, it died in conference.
Forever chemical one?
Okay, yeah, and it died in conference, she says. Okay, so that's good. So I think we're caught up. Okay, anything else, Jason?
There's always more. But
well,
I don't know what we're looking at timelines, or else we would be here until the next fire comes through. And so I don't know if you want to take that risk or not.
I actually do not. That was the one on PFAs and died in conference last year. Looking for it this year. I'm pretty sure it's out there again because I'm pretty sure Sandra said. And so, yeah, when you read notwithstanding is a terrible word, and that's a big no-no. Well, we've got a few more. I mean, so many people usually stay with us for 2 hours. So if you're committed and you've got bills there that we could put out, you know, I'm sure people are going to be, you know, happy to listen. So do you have any other ones?
Let me go on 2 more subject matters. How's that?
Okay,
perfect. And we'll move quickly, but transparency is one of the most important concepts. The idea that if independent media and the grassroots are to win the day at all levels of government, school, county, state legislature, city, and then all the hidden layers of government, the various public trust and, you know, Title 19 fire department or whatever, we have to absolutely preserve open meeting and open records laws. Those are under attack now. And we're not just talking about Great Web 2.0, Transparency 2.0 proposals. We're talking about the laws that have been in place since the 70s and have been the ethos of transparency in this state. And they are under assault, in my view, principally because lobbyists funded by your taxpayer dollars represent government entities, and those government entities are now the tail wagging the dog, and that includes county and city, specifically OML and ACO. These are the associations represented by lobbyists, and now even I think counties are hiring their own lobbyists directly.
Yeah.
And the way it's been told to me is there's an ever-growing army of lobbyists absolutely outnumbering anyone in that building who understands and knows the importance of transparency. And they get exemption after exemption. They're getting so many exemptions potentially from the transparency laws that we're on the back foot now defending things that have been important concepts since the 70s. It's not even the ones we need to occur, like open ledgers, recorded meetings that are always available, codifying the right of the public to have their voice heard at meetings. These are the things that says, you know what, 2 people on a board shouldn't be allowed, if they make up a majority of the board, to talk business. The Corporation Commission got that exemption last year, and it was shocking, essentially. And I think Jerry Bonen's site had a headline that basically said, corporation begins era of non-public discussion. They have an exemption now where 2 corporation commissioners can essentially talk business outside the view of the public. ACO saw that, the county commissioners, they tried to drive that train this year. They're still driving one of those bills, House Bill 1664, which I think got out of the House already, or is on general order, maybe. General order, I think.
What does general order mean?
It means it's, thank you. It means that it's before the full House for consideration now. And so it's out of committee, and the House can take it up.
So we have to stop House Bill 1664.
Yes.
Okay.
That has been, because of transparency advocates, it's not nearly as bad as it was. But it's still starting to codify that process by which county commissioners, in this case, can talk and or potentially be in the same place at the same time without telling the public they're there. OML had a bill, and I don't know the number because it was in the Senate. It was carried by Julie Daniels, which was their attack on open records law. And I know that they didn't get everything they wanted, and I'm not sure what the status is of that. But I wanted to just highlight, it almost feels like OML and ACO tag team this year, where the cities are getting the exemptions on open records laws, and ACO was driving hard on open meeting exemption. And then the Corporation Commission's exemption is going to sunset. It's going to be very important, probably next year, when legislators try to extend that sunset, that just gets shut down. Because that's the one that set the precedent that allows first, whatever 3-man boards say, well, 2 people should be allowed to talk. And then 5 people on a board should 3 be able to talk, and it will just grow from there.
So Lori has a good question. She said, if county commissioners can do that, can we expect the other elected boards to claim that too?
Absolutely. They're pointing to the Corporation Commission. If they can do it, then we can. Then what's to stop, a 5-man town board from doing it? Or the concept of size is absolutely the camel's nose under the tent, because they start small, and then there are just too many exemptions already in these laws, and there aren't enough people who know and understand to defend them. If the rare few that ever leave the building that are defending them now, we could be in a very bad way. And so this is somewhere where there's got to be a lot of education for the grassroots, because these laws, especially like trying to hold school boards accountable, some of those they're already paying the attorneys to fight at every step.
Oh yeah. No, we're paying the attorneys, Jason.
Yes, they're already taking our money to pay their attorneys to fight us at every step, when we just want to say, what did you spend money on? When did you talk about spending that money? And what are the conflicts of interest? And then, okay, 2 years later, maybe you find out, but by then it's too late.
Well, and you ought to watch the interview we did with Cindy on Wednesday, because she talks about that, and that it was really very good. Yes, we do have a complete list of lobbyists that, well, the fox is guarding that hen house too, so you never can really be sure. But if you go to the Ethics Commission website, you can find a list of registered lobbyists, but so many of them get around it by not registering. So, I mean, you just have no way of knowing. I mean, we have one LA, one legislative assistant right now, who's a former lobbyist, who's still basically lobbying while she's doing her job, from what I can hear. So who the heck knows? But you can go there and find out about it. Lisa says the things about transparency make her blood boil, and I totally get that. So I'm with Laurie here. Can't the AG? I mean, think about it. The AG Drummond bangs his hand on the desk constantly and says, transparency, open records, I'm for open records. Well, why can't he step in here and do something?
I think that if he wanted to put something into that in the public perception sense, he's not been afraid to have an opinion about a lot of things. I don't think I've ever seen an AG who's just weighed into everything. And so it's one thing to say, generically speaking, transparency is good. Don't we all agree? Well, everyone says that. But if he said, what the corporation commissioners are doing when they're lobbying for a bill that's allowing them to get around the law, and what the lawmakers did when they signed off on that, and what ACO is doing, and what OML is doing in legislation, these things are an anathema to well-settled concepts of transparency that have been in the law for 50 years. And we've got to, one, stop them. And two, if you ever want DOGE to happen, you've got to have a whole new generation of transparency at every level. If you are a government entity in Oklahoma, you should, by law, have a public ledger that everyone can see online in real time, first and foremost. And two, every meeting you have should be online and reviewable, whether it's on a YouTube or Rumble or on your web hosting platform of choice. That is reviewable at a later date for at least a set number of years thereafter. And those two concepts, that and the public should always have a right to speak at the meeting. If you are a public body, the public should always have a right to speak at the meeting. Those three concepts, if they were put into law, and the public meeting, open meeting and open records law is successfully defended from all of these exemptions, and some of the ones they've already gotten erased, then we would be somewhere. But it requires a leader and a strong leader coming out and advocating not just for the concept, but for those specifics. And then two, as it relates to Drummond, Anthony Sykes being in that role is huge. I need to know what the outcomes are of that. And I haven't seen Drummond highlighting those outcomes, and maybe I've missed it. But
No.
If tomorrow he says, hey, guess what? Tulsa wasn't cooperating on this audit thing. Anthony Sykes came in there and did what Anthony Sykes can do, and they're cooperating now. Then that would be big. But I need to see that. And I don't know that I've seen it yet. I'm very happy Anthony Sykes is there. He was a huge ally on a lot of good legislation.
Yes, he
and
was.
He carried as the Senate author a lot of our Transparency 2.0 legislation. So that was really an encouraging sign. I just need to see Drummond pointing back to that, because if he lets Anthony Sykes just do what Anthony Sykes will do, Drummond's going to lose a lot of support with government institutional bureaucrats everywhere. So I need to see those specifics. That would be courage, and that would be remarkable. But is Drummond really going to step up and lose the support of the institutional players, school boards especially, who he's heavily courted with his polarization off of Ryan Walters?
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see, but it should have happened by now.
So Jana has a great comment here. Doesn't the caucus work similarly? I put an extra syllable in there, but you know what I mean. I mean, they meet behind closed doors. There's no open records. There's no journal that discusses what they talk about. There's none of that. And that's, again, why I hate this whole concept of the caucus.
Yes.
That's why.
The legislature exempted itself from open meetings and open records. There are still some components that you can get to, but the end of the day says that if the legislature is going to be exempted from that, then they don't necessarily have the moral authority to be consistent on these laws. And that was something we worked very hard to try to make progress on. When we lost the battle to get the legislature covered on this, I think it was 2012, then that was really a turning point in the fight for transparency, in terms of that, the fact that Republicans as the new majority we're going to bring a new generation of transparency. We got a lot of wins back in the day, but when we lost that battle, when we lost the battle of saying we're going to set the example, that was brutal. And sometime maybe I'll do an article on the fight that went on behind the scenes to stop that from happening. It was pretty rough stuff, but that's probably a story for another day.
Well, and Denise has said our Garfield County commissioners have denied the public to speak during meetings. I've heard that. And there was at one point, we discussed that with our town attorney, and she said, well, there's no law that says that they have to. You can literally tell them, no, you can't speak, or give them, a certain amount of time to speak or whatever. And I always hated that. When I was mayor, if they wanted to say something, I wasn't going to sit there and go, you're done at 2 minutes. I mean, it's their town. If you've got an issue, even if you don't like what I'm doing, it's your ability to say it. So it bugs me that people have such tiny little egos that they can't hear somebody say what they don't like. And it's not just the egos. It's, I have my own agenda over here. I'm doing so-and-so with so-and-so, and I don't want you getting in the middle of that and trying to get your taxpayer dollars away from me. That's part of the other thing.
Jenny, in that vein of transparency, look at your own experience with the election board. Was any part of that, all that executive session, sitting out, all of us sitting out there in the hallway for hours and hours, and you and Cheryl, was any part of that had to be behind closed doors? Probably not. Probably not a single piece should have been behind closed doors.
No, because they would have found out, everybody would have found out what they said to me and how they were treating us inside that meeting, and it would not have gone over with the public. So absolutely not. Too many people don't realize these days the concept that these politicians are our employees, and we need people to reclaim our power as employers. That's actually the bottom line. I think Gracie, don't you think, Jason? She hit the bottom line here. We don't make these people behave because we don't see them as what they are, which is we're their employers, essentially.
Yeah. Independent media allows us to provide the information to the people to make that possible. Your show, others, we're changing the dynamic. When it's filtered through the corporate media, then the people, number one, don't have access to the information, and two, they don't have the bandwidth to figure it out. So when they're those co-opted legislators, they come home to the district, maybe the person goes to a Republican Party meeting, an OK2A meeting, whatever it is. But what I'm telling you is there are 15, what I call the soft, mushy people going to those meetings. They're part of the problem. On final passage, they may cast the right vote, but they're enabling the system that defines it. And so it's all about just getting this information out there and then trusting the people to do the right thing. And they are. It's so encouraging. Big white pill moment, just seeing everyone that is engaging in independent media and following it and then having their voice heard.
But the other side of the sword there, though, Jason, is all these legislators are allowed to take so much money out of district that we don't even matter because we're not the ones who fill their coffers. All they got to do is maybe put up with a couple of us, raising a little bit of ruckus on them. But
yeah, because I swear if we could get if these legislators, and I don't see how it's going to happen, would be strong enough to pass a bill that would say you can only take money within your district from individuals. That would stop.
Well, at least 80 or 90%, Jenny. 80 or 90% needs to come from within your district, and that's it.
Yeah,
look at that money trail.
What does the American Medical Association need from you that they have to give you, a $1,200 or $1,500 donation?
Yeah.
What does it matter to them? The American Medical Association is in your district. I mean, they have no reason to be giving legislators money. And it's the same way with Devin. It's the same way with everything. They just, they don't have it. So Tawana wants to ask you if you're willing to run it for U.S. Senate.
Someone's going to step up and do that, and I will support that person, but that needs to happen. Ask Tawana if she will do it.
Hold on a second. There was another one that was, Lisa's that I put up there because it's so funny. The legislature exempted itself. I think we found the problem. Pottawatomie County went to a 3-minute comment time, and you better not say anything at any other time or you may get banned from Corporation Commission meetings. Yeah, that's not okay. I mean, I'm sorry. It's just not. They've written the rules around employer control. That's true. 100%. The people have been purposely removed from the power through campaign promises and the bait and switch. That's 100%. Denise agrees with me. Yes, limit donations to verified residents from your district. Like that's ever going to happen. But, I don't know what that means. Okay, so what was the other one? You had another one.
Just real quick to Michael's point on the legislators themselves, you can ask Dean Davis, Kevin Wallace, or John Talley about whether or not it matters. And will it actually happen, or will the dark money bail them out? They're not here, and their replacements: Jim Shaw, Molly Jenkins, Gabe Woolley. Mm-hmm. We can do this. The components are being brave, courageous, being able to give up a year of your time to do this, refusing the lobbyist money, which will encourage people to vote for you, and it's sort of the answer to that lobbyist problem. And being willing to expose these votes to the Republican primary voting universe in any number of districts around the state. And if I'm talking to you and you're the person who's willing to do this, my email address is on there. Please reach out. Let's make it happen. But the last subject matter, elections. You mentioned elections. One of the most important bills you probably haven't heard about is House Bill 1515. This was one that passed. It's by Molly Jenkins. And it starts to get us away from what I think is happening specifically in Oklahoma County, which I think is ballot harvesting. And if you look at Oklahoma County, I think the Republicans have like a 30,000 vote advantage. There's this perception out there that is incorrect, that there's a blue wave and Oklahoma County is inevitably going blue. If you look at the trends, Oklahoma County, the 3 political affiliations in the last month, 700 new independents, 400 new Republicans. The Democrats lost 100.
Oh.
Oklahoma County Democrats in the next 5 to 6 years will be the 3rd largest political affiliation group in Oklahoma County at this rate. And on top of that, in Logan County, it just happened. In Canadian County, it's already happened. They're already in 3rd place. Independents outnumber Democrats in both of those counties, and in several years at this pace, in Oklahoma County, it's going to happen too. What is going on in Oklahoma County? We can see it in that mail-in absentee vote. And it's hard to look at the discrepancies there without saying there's got to be organized ballot harvesting going on. And what Molly Jenkins proposed was probably the most important election reform, which said, you can still vote absentee by mail, but you need a reason.
Correct.
And the election board isn't just necessarily going to send you a clump of ballots and say, hey, let's flood the zone with ballots. And anyone votes at any time if they don't have a reason. They should have to come in and say, hey, I want to vote because I have work that day. I have an excuse. It should be inconvenient to vote absentee. It should be more inconvenient than in person. Because what happens if you have everyone voting this way, number one, elections get a whole lot more expensive because there's a time window, right? The small guy who can only afford a little bit of expenditure on the campaign can't start releasing that money until almost election day. The powerful guy, the George Soros funded guy, he's campaigning and running ads 3 months out. That's why we have Obamacare, Medicaid in Oklahoma, right? And so the gist of it is you've got to take no excuse absentee ballot away and stop letting the county election board flood the zone with ballots that the harvesters can just go out there and use a lot of money, probably coming in from very nefarious USAID type NGOs, and try to turn this county blue when the voter registration data says it's not turning blue.
But I do want to go back to this because this is an important thing. Dems are infiltrating the Republican Party, thus filling it with rhinos. And it's not, I actually have a friend that we used to do homeschool together, and she came from California, and I knew she was a little bit more liberal, but I didn't realize how liberal she was. She just recently, and I took a snapshot of it, she just recently in the last election had on her Facebook page, okay, all of you who are Democrats, it's time for you to get out and change your affiliation to Republican so we can vote in the primary. I mean, they do this specifically. So you can tell me what the numbers say, Jason, but I'm kind of with John. I think it's not that we're gaining more Republicans. I think we're gaining more Democrats because they can keep switching their registration.
There's no doubt that there is an element of that, and we will see that more and more statewide. But what you would, if you believe the mainstream thought out there, and really you get it through the corporate media, you would think the county itself is going blue based on proud liberal Democrats. And no matter what happens, a proud liberal Democrat has a very hard time giving up that moniker, right? I mean, it's just the way a person thinks. But there's definitely some of that. I'll give you that. But to the point of the bill, the bill, regardless of whose party it is, really, what we know is that if the person votes absentee by mail, the results are completely different, including in nonpartisan elections like Edmond mayor race. We have seen that, and school board, right?
Michael's race.
That discrepancy is always for the establishment, corporatist, or liberal candidate, while the election day comes out right like you would hope and think in Oklahoma County. And so that's why, and Oklahoma County does this weird thing with how they group the absentee into their individual precincts instead of showing them distributed amongst all the precincts. But Jenkins' bill passed the policy committee. This was one that is in a friendly environment in the only sympathetic ear I think grassroots have in terms of an oversight committee chairman, and that is Kevin West, who agreed to hear it in his full committee. But unfortunately, in that full committee, it did not go through. And keep in mind, I think this is the most important election reform bill out there.
I agree.
It died 6-10. And the reason it died is because some of these guys who say they're conservatives, they went with the Democrats. The Democrats hated this bill.
Of
I was
course.
told Laura Boyd, former Democrat candidate for governor, was making calls. She was over the target on this, and the Democrats were spazzing out.
Yeah.
And she got it out of subcommittee into full committee, and the Republicans joined the Democrats and sunk it. I think the nays on this were 10. They were Bennett, Crosswhite, Dempsey, Fugate, Kelly, LePac, Luttrell, May, Munson, and Stiegel. With that vote, those 10 betrayed our cause in terms of just the quality of our election. They may have a reason, they may have overthought it, but that bill is possibly right there amongst the most important that needed to go through. Again, it got caught up in that oversight committee system, and that's a problem.
And this was Kevin West's group that voted it down.
Well, West was for it. He gave it a hearing. The ones that voted for it were Hayes, Olson, Roberts, Shaw, and Woolley. So you can see this is normally a friendly committee for us because Crosswhite, LePac, and Stiegel are considered conservatives. And had they voted
I
for
got
it,
to talk to Jay about that. That's a bad deal.
It's an awful deal. Had they voted for it, we would have passed it, and we would be looking at getting this on the House floor. But for some reason, those Republicans went against it.
Well, it can come back again. I mean, she can resurrect it next year.
I think that's right, or refile it, which I sure hope she will, because we have to keep at this one.
You can refile it, I think, unless no. I mean, I think you can refile it even if it dies on one floor. So if it dies on the Senate floor, then you can still bring it back and try it again. Or if it dies on the House floor, you can if it dies in both, I think. But I'll have to check that out. But that's absolutely a fact. And I was looking to see, because there were some other, like John said, I dug deep into this in my county, and it's scary. The elected people who were Dems and have changed just so they can run as a Republican. And there is a lot of that. It's Wendy says bloated voter rolls allow for the harvesting. Jason speaks of, we have to get this under control in Oklahoma. We need to re-register all Oklahomans to vote and clean up our rolls. I don't think that's a bad idea. She's talked about that before. But yeah, definitely that has to be. And here's the thing about that particular issue, because I mentioned this to Molly at the time too, that I don't know the exact year that this was allowed, but when I started voting here in Oklahoma, you had to have your mama had to, and your dog had to die, and like 70,000 things had to happen before you could get a ballot. You had to go vote on that day, and there were certain exceptions. You know, if you couldn't get off of work for some reason, or whatever, or you were an expat, or you were stationed in but you couldn't just go, I like voting early. These people who do this bug me so bad. You can't take that away because I like voting early. Well, why don't you just vote like everybody's supposed to vote and recognize that you're part of the problem?
Yep. Voting early by mail, one, yields the chain of custody moot. So you are trusting your ballot to any number of things that cannot be documented. So you undervalue your own vote by doing it that way. Two, it means you're making a decision before both sides have had the chance to make their argument for you, which, by the way, is why county commissioners get an open meeting exemption, right? Two of them can conspire before the third guy gets to say, hey, you guys are insane. Tearing up roads on purpose or cutting cable lines on purpose is a bad idea. It's the same concept. If the ballot harvesters can get to you before you can find out that taking on Obamacare Medicaid policy will bankrupt the state at some date in the future, that ballot is gone. You're done. And then when you see the ads, when finally the other side was able to get up and say the other side of the story, it's too late. In Pennsylvania, if you voted early and you voted for John Fetterman for the Senate, you never learned that he was mentally incapacitated probably at the time that he got that vote. Shouldn't that matter? That's why this system favors big money. It favors who can start running election ads like Gettner Drummond 2 years before the election, or whatever. It's insane. Whereas we're waiting on the conservative to emerge, and that person will have a lot less money than Drummond. But if election were to open now, lots of people would vote for Drummond, right? And so this whole system is corrupt to the core, and it's the Democrats that enabled it back in the day. Republicans have not had the courage to bring it under control. And when Jenkins said, I'm going to be courageous and step up, and got it out of committee, you can be assured that all the left-wing forces in Oklahoma County probably saw something coming down the train track that meant they'll never turn Oklahoma County blue, and they knew it. One more bill. In the same vein, House Bill 1028 by Jenkins was also a very important in the same vein reform, in that it said if the election board member in Oklahoma County wants to watch them count these harvested ballots when they're running them through at the election board, then that person should absolutely have the right to do that in person. And as much credit as I can give Olson for hearing 1515 and voting for it twice and getting it out of committee, I was really shocked that he didn't hear this bill. He's in charge of the Elections Commission, or the Elections Committee, Elections and Ethics. And this bill is so important because what is represented by the fact that an election board secretary can tell his own board members, no, you don't have full access to this agency, is an anathema to a board being able to do their job. And this was about no closed circuit TV access, none of that. It was about in-person access. Right. That bill should have been heard, and that's all I've got for today.
Well, and don't forget, that was the reason I got fired, right? Was complaining that we didn't have access, because it's in the law to say that we have access.
Yep, you inspired that bill.
Do what?
You inspired that bill.
Oh, yay!
Yeah.
I inspired something. Usually it's not good. Okay, so a couple more things. I loved this one. Liza says we should quit telling everyone that they're special and this selfishness may start declining. I don't know, it might. Who knows, but I love that one. No absentee, no early voting on election day. It's important for secure elections. Predictive analysis is used to determine how many ballots to harvest or manipulate to outright steal an election. We cannot give them that heads up. That's why we say that absentee and early voting should be a no-no, unless you're going to get turnout to the point where election manipulation shows the fraud immediately due to over 100% turnout, which of course we're never going to have. But I think Wendy makes a really great point on that. Okay, so since we're coming up on 2 hours, I mean, and we filled it well. I mean, we had great comments, and I think we had some great bills there to talk about. So in closing it out, Jason, what can you say about this upcoming other half of our legislature?
I would say so far, on balance, being that it's a non-election year, I haven't seen the flock thing dying and all of that. I think it's going about as good as I would have predicted it could have gone. The negative aspects of it, I haven't been surprised by, the icing of Jim Shaw, for example. I could have predicted that, but we haven't seen flock come through. We haven't seen new surveillance stuff so much yet. It seems to me like the grassroots are winning, and there's just this sense of inevitability about it, that this is the turning point year. And based on the election results and the fact that so many of the good legislators are holding their own, I'm really, really optimistic. The one big caveat, though, is because of those rules getting worse and the conference committee process potentially being abused, the calendar being pushed back 2 weeks. May is going to be a scary, scary time, because that's when everything could turn very, very dark. And so that's when, check back, we'll see. But that's when the engagement of the grassroots in real time would be necessitated, so that if that bill doing flock surveillance is filed, late night and then brought to the floor the next day, there's still some sense of grassroots participation, so that the leaders on that issue, like Tom Gann, when they take to the floor, they're not alone. The people at the grassroots are behind them.
Right. Well, I mean, we're going to keep in touch. And so whatever you find and whatever you want us to know, I mean, we're absolutely, happy to help you out there and to help us out, to get that information out to the people. So we're committed to doing that. Right, Michael?
100%.
100%. All right. Jason, it's been great to, these while we were sleeping atrocities need to end. That's an absolute fact. Okay. So we will be in touch with you. And if we don't see you next month, we will definitely see you in May. So just, any information that you have, we're happy to get it out. And Gracie says, I try not to miss any of these. I'm grateful for all the information that you guys put out. And well, we really appreciate you, Gracie, because we're just talking to dead air if nobody is going to help us out with this. So we're very, very glad that you guys watch and, tell all your friends. So let me say this. We have coming up this afternoon at 1:00. We have a special broadcast with Visit V1SUT, who's going to talk about some of the really bad rhino-y stuff that's been going on with some bills in the House. And you're definitely going to want to stay with us for 1:00. So I know it's a long day, but be back with us if you can. And Michael, do you have anything before we sign off?
No, other than, what it reminds me of, Jason, just like looking at the Capitol itself. It's like these guys just go up there, they literally just play cops and robbers, and then we all just lose. They're just up there, acting like they're doing all this stuff, and it's we just lose.
Yep, but the tide is turning. I'm really convinced of that.
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, the new crop of reps that have been out there this year, just sticking with it. And the Senate, I mean, I haven't watched them as closely, but I mean, I think the Senate's been doing okay. I haven't been paying enough attention probably. But anyway, thank you guys for being with us. We will see you again at 1:00 this afternoon with Mary from Visit, and you'll want to stay tuned. And otherwise, we'll see you then. And then we'll see you again next Wednesday at 9 a.m. and next Friday at 9 a.m. So we'll see you then. Thank you again for staying tuned. And we appreciate you as always, and see you again soon. Bye.